For a long time, companies treated their learning programs like overhead. Nice to have, easy to cut. Not anymore. With tech, AI, and skills evolving fast, learning isn't just about HR or mandatory compliance. Learning is a competitive advantage. It's how you keep up. Learning is how you enable sellers, onboard talent, educate customers, and scale faster. It's how you act, adapt, and evolve. And at Docebo, learning is what we do. So for learning that never stops, start with Docebo. Docebo, never stop learning.
It's very hard dealing with change. There's a saying, and I don't want to get it wrong, and I can't remember where it comes from. So apologies to the originator. But new beginnings are often disguised as painful endings. I think that's how a lot of people are feeling going into this year.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govind Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govind Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 343. And today, the napkin has just one word on it, change. And as you hear that word, you might notice something interesting. For some people, it feels heavy. For others, it feels uncertain. And for a few, it feels like possibility. It's interesting how one word can carry so much weight depending upon where you are in your life right now. Because whether we like it or not, change seems to be everywhere. Right now, industries are shifting, technology is accelerating, jobs are evolving, and identities are stretching. And you may have already felt it, that quiet tension, the subtle uneasiness, the sense that something is moving even if you can't fully name it yet. And sometimes when change shows up, it doesn't feel like growth, it feels like loss. My guest today, Greg Tebbutt, understands that deeply. Long before he led global brands like Adidas, Coca-Cola, Microsoft, and Volkswagen, through massive strategic pivots, he experienced a change in his hospital bed at 17 years old. After a devastating motorcycle accident, doctors told him he would never play sport again. Flat on his back, 7 months of recovery, too much time to think. And somewhere in all that stillness, something shifted for him. Nothing changed physically, though he did heal, but everything changed internally. And that's where this episode begins, because sometimes change can't begin when circumstances shift. It begins the moment you decide to see those circumstances differently. So as you listen today, you might begin to notice where in your own life something has been asking you to adapt, to pivot, to grow. And you don't have to force that awareness. You can simply let it surface. Because at the end of the conversation, you might find yourself relating to change in a way that feels lighter, clearer, and even empowering. So, what if change isn't happening to you? What if change is happening for you? And maybe, just maybe, that is the very thing that feels uncertain right now. And it's quietly preparing you for something bigger. So as you listen, allow yourself to stay curious and notice what resonates, notice what shifts, and notice who you are becoming in the presence of change. Let's dive into my conversation with Greg. Greg Tebbutt, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have you here today.
Awesome, Govind. Thank you so much. I'm as excited to be chatting to you. Can't wait.
So one of the things that I love, when we're doing Paper Napkin Wisdom, some people take the approach of cramming as much onto the napkin as they possibly can. And literally every square inch can be accounted for in some way, shape, or form with diagrams, illustrations, or words. You used a slightly different approach on your napkin. And you said one word, change. Why did you share that with me?
It's a big word, and it talks to so much. But I think that it certainly seems to be the word of 2026. With everyone that I speak to, I just think of all those people who who lost their jobs last year, as an example. How they feel at this moment as they face the year ahead, all the uncertainty that AI brings to job security for so many people this year. And so it kind of, to me, feels like there's this uneasiness in the air around what this year is going to bring. And so it felt like a really good subject matter to talk about. But it's also at the heart of the business I've just launched as well.
One of the things that I think is really interesting about what you just shared, you said change is a big word, a word of 2026, and you spoke of 3 gigantic challenges. Challenges to people who lost their jobs, the insecurity and risk that comes with AI, and just the uneasiness around about what this year is going to bring. Isn't it interesting that for most people, change is a challenging word?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's about being uncomfortable, and I think as humans we don't like being uncomfortable. The trick is how to become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Well, I think that's sort of where I was going. I mean, I think that growth is uncomfortable. We're going to new areas. We're going to new places. We're doing new things to us, not new things to an expert in those things, but new things to us. And that growth puts us in a place of intentional discomfort. Isn't that true?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Time marches on. We don't have control over many things in our life. We have control over what we're able to do. And I think being able to embrace change and embrace that discomfort, because you need to, is a big step for a lot of people to take. And I hope our conversation can maybe help some of them take that step in a more meaningful way this year.
So let's talk about, how you came upon this simple and powerful message of change. You've spent time in a variety of different places before you got to your current role, your current company, Fixer, co-founding the company. Let's talk about your journey and how you've changed along the way, because I think that's at the heart of this exploration in this story, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's right.
So where did you start your change journey?
Well, that's such a great question, because at some point I think something happens that allows us to accept and understand change, and that happened to me when I was 17 years old. I had a really bad motorbike accident, and ended up spending about 7 months in hospital, about 2.5 weeks in ICU, and it was, I was 17 years old, and once I'd got through kind of managing the pain, the next thing on my mind was, why did this happen to me? I've lost everything, because I was also, I love sport, and I played a lot of sport, and there I was, pretty much a mess on the hospital bed, and so after a while, that didn't change. Feeling that way didn't change anything, and so one day I woke up and I realized that I need to accept where I am right now, and I need to understand the context that I'm in, and I need to set myself new positive goals for the future, and so that's what I did. I changed my attitude and counted myself lucky to be alive. I set myself kind of short and medium term goals, and with determination, achieved all of them. But that taught me a lesson about how to deal with life and how to deal with business as well. But it taught me that at a young age. So I guess now I can look back and know why it happened. But at the time, I sure didn't understand.
For a long time, companies treated their learning programs like overhead. Nice to have, easy to cut. Not anymore. With tech, AI, and skills evolving fast, learning isn't just about HR or mandatory compliance. Learning is a competitive advantage. It's how you keep up. Learning is how you enable sellers, onboard talent, educate customers, and scale faster. It's how you act, adapt, and evolve. And at Docebo, learning is what we do. So for learning that never stops, start with Docebo. Docebo, never stop learning.
Standard.
So 17 years old, motorcycle accident, 2 weeks in ICU. I relate to various points of that, and not personally. I mean, I love riding motorcycles and driving motorcycles, but I have a 17-year-old, and we were just talking about this. Her foot was run over by a car today. Yesterday and today, the sort of recovery continues. So this all happens, but the ICU portion, my son was in ICU for 2 weeks with bacterial meningitis, and he was just 9 at the time. And there's all kinds of the recovery process is, sure, you leave ICU after 2 weeks, but the recovery takes a long time. And I think that's what you're sharing, that there was a long time where you wondered, why did this happen to you? And it took you some time to discover how it happened for you. And is that the moment? You say something happens that allows you to understand and adapt to change. It wasn't the accident, it was the recovery that was that something, wasn't it?
Exactly right. It was that. It was a realization during that recovery process. And the thing with recovery is that the problem with it is you have too much time in your hands to think about stuff. And that's, a good and a bad thing. But in this instance, fortunately, it ended up being a really good thing for me. It gave me, it turned on a big light and realization for me. And I've adapted that lesson to how I work and how I live my life now.
Okay, so let's talk about the moment that you realized, because I'm sure there was a moment that you realized that your perspective had changed. What did that feel like in your body? I think people think about it and say, oh, this is the moment I realized. But what did it do for you, that moment that you realized that this happened for you and you had changed your focus?
It's hard to describe it. It's I suddenly had hope. So from being depressed in a hospital bed, I felt mildly excited and optimistic about what lay ahead, and that process took a few days to uncover itself as I thought more and more. But by the time I had a plan, which was a couple of days after the realization, I felt better than I'd ever felt, even though I was still on my back.
So nothing changed. You were on your back. You were in your bed. Physically, nothing changed. So listen, if you're just listening to this podcast and not watching, you could see it on Greg's face right now. And it wasn't last week that you were 17 years old, Greg. I think you're, of a similar vintage to me. So this was several years ago, and I think 10 years ago, right? But by your bio, it was only 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, when you were 17 in your bed, this changed for you, and that same feeling, I think I can see in your face right now.
Yeah.
It's powerful, isn't it?
That's amazing. I kind of feel that. It is powerful. It's very hard dealing with change. There's a saying, and I don't want to get it wrong, and I can't remember where it comes from. So apologies to the originator, but new beginnings are often disguised as painful endings. I think that's how a lot of people are feeling going into this year. And the reason I mention it is, the business that the Fixer, the business that I've co-founded, is in the ad world, the marketing and advertising world. I'm a chief marketing officer and have been for some time now. But the ad world lost tens of thousands of jobs, and as did many industries. But certainly that world lost, and so a lot of jobs, a lot of consolidation happening, and so a lot of those people are close to me, people that I know, people that I'd worked with many years ago. So when suddenly it hits home and it's more real, you think about it, a lot more, and the way I think about change, hopefully, can be, of some help to some folk that are going through, a lot of change right now.
I think you're right, and I think that I think you'd have to be an ostrich with their heads in the sands not to feel energetically the amount of confusion that exists globally, not just in advertising, as you just talked about in your sector, but in a variety of sectors as integrated economies are pulling apart. And everybody is moving in a direction that nobody predicted could be possible even 5 or 10 years ago. Part of it is driven by technology, and part of it is driven by other socio-political or economic factors that are occurring globally. And all of this sort of happening at the same time is a powerful force for change, isn't it? And kind of like a motorcycle accident, a lot of people are in hospital on bed, and they're faced with the uncomfortable reality that a future they envisioned is no longer possible for them.
Yeah. That acceptance is hard,
right? Because you're saying goodbye to something that you may have worked a long time for.
That's right. Yeah, or you may have loved dearly, but if you look at your current circumstances, that's where you are. You may wish you're not there, but the reality is that you are, and you have to find the best way to, move forward positively and change where you are for the better.
Indeed. So you went from something happening to you and something happening for you around something that happened that allowed you to understand and accept or adapt to the change. What was that new vision? What was that new goal that popped into your head as you lay there?
I said to myself, the doctor said I'd never play sport again. I said to them, I didn't believe them. And I said to myself, I'd play a game of rugby a year later. I also decided what it was I really wanted to do, and what excited me and what inspired me. I'd had so much time to think, just kind of lying there on my own for many, many days that, I don't know why that clarity came, but it came as a result of what I went through. And so I set myself some goals for, once I'd recovered physically, what I wanted to do next. I had to still get through grade 12 that year, and then I still had to obviously go on to university, to college. But it was a pivotal year, and it taught me a lot, but it also gave me direction.
Indeed. It's amazing how much
a catalyzing comment can be when someone tells you that you can't do something, and that certainly evoked a challenge for you, and it's making me smile because I relate very strongly to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So so
Excellent.
so I'm really um I'm caught on this idea though that you had this thing came to you, and I really want to. The real moment was this didn't happen to you, this happened for me, and this is what I'm focused on now. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm choosing to do. And it was a choice that you made that gave you hope, lit you up, still lights you up, and you had to just learn a new way of achieving those goals. Did you not?
Yeah, that's right. I had to just set a path based on, I think based on where I was at, Governor, I think a lot of it, what I'm grateful for, and thankfully wonderful parents, is also just the importance of self-belief and internal validation, because I think, having that foundation makes it a little easier to stand up and say, I'm going down this path. I'm not going to be that person, that negative person, that person who's, feeling sorry for himself. I'm going to be somebody who takes control of my life.
I think it's really powerful that you're sharing that, because really what you're saying is the belief came before you had the proof that you could do it. And I believe that belief always has to come before evidence. The belief is the important part. The evidence always comes up, and we can make the belief. We can't, the belief is what makes the evidence, but we can't make the evidence. We have to make the belief, and the belief in action creates evidence. And I'm sure you
Very
picked
wise
up,
words.
right? You picked up evidence as you went along, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And so I worked in I was in the ad world before I went into the marketing, on the marketing side, and so it was very fast paced, and there was a lot of pivoting that happened constantly. I worked across 60 brands over a period of about 20 years in that business, and so there was just it was kind of chaotic. It required daily reevaluation of everything to make sure that, whatever was being done was was the best possible solution and outcome.
And that is even more so the case now, when the landscape is changing in moments as opposed to even days. And just to be clear, when you talk about 60 brands, you're being shy about the brands that you worked with, but Adidas, Coca-Cola, Microsoft, Volkswagen, I mean, these are big brands, right?
Yeah. I was very fortunate. So again, I count myself fortunate to be exposed to all of those brands. I've got a great VW story about change. If there's time to talk about that as well.
Yeah. Why don't we dive right in right away?
Yeah. I think because I think it's also important to, as we talk about this isn't just about personal change. It's about how businesses need to think, act, and behave. And I think that I was again fortunate enough to be in the position where I joined the VW of America and headed up marketing there from 2017, and that was about a year and a half after the Dieselgate crisis happened. And in 2016,
Wow.
2016, VW is the most hated brand in America.
So just for people who don't understand what the Dieselgate situation is, real quickly, what was it?
It was essentially an emissions cheating scandal. So on diesel cars, there were devices fitted that gave false readings. And that really came, I think, as a result of a culture that just, wasn't necessarily as healthy as it should be. And so it was obviously, because most of the cars were imported at the time. It was obviously a big shock for everyone in America at VW, and certainly a massive shock for its dealer network and consumers. And
I was a TDI driver as well.
Got you, yeah. And so you felt cheated. You felt cheated, and I get that. So did everyone who worked there as well, by the way. And understandably, because they weren't part of it. They suffered the consequences of it. And so I had the unenviable task of trying to get people to reconsider VW. And things take time, but I think what's really important is to have a good story to tell, for people to listen and believe you and think differently about you. And so what that scandal did was it completely changed the culture and direction that the VW brand took, in a really positive way. And the brand pivoted to electric vehicles and invested in other energy sources and really decided to become a brand that was about making the future better for the world, not destroying it with carbon dioxide. And so there was, when that decision was made and the brand invested billions in going down that path, there was suddenly there was a story to tell, because what had happened had affected a big change in the organization and was setting it down a new path. And so I was lucky enough to convince the president and CEO at the time for us to put a redemption moment out there to the public, to admit that we had made a mistake, but it had made us better, and that we were now going down this new path. And so that we did that with a massive campaign called Hello Light, and then completely repositioned the brand following that, which I believe is still how it's currently positioned today. So that was a good example of a brand needing to, of a whole organization needing to change as a result of circumstances that had happened. I was just on one part of it, that massive change, which was telling a story of it. But what the company realized was that culturally it needed to change, and strategically it needed to change its direction. And so it pivoted very quickly towards that. And so I think that's also a good example of a brand, understanding its context and reacting in the right way, towards going down a better path.
That's a powerful story, because I interact with the brand from the other side, where we had a Jetta TDI, diesel, and then after Dieselgate, we obviously let go of the TDI and came back to it recently with a sport wagon. And so
Right.
it was VW sport wagon. So we became part of the VW family again. And it was a wonderful car for us while we had it. So
That's great.
So totally understand what you're talking about. And I experienced that journey from the other side of the table. So that change, so changes can affect us as individuals, as leaders, but also organizationally. One of the things that stood out for me in that story is that the story came out of the change and that redemption moment. It's almost, again, that moment that the belief turned into action created the opportunity for the story, created the opportunity for marketing. Is that something that companies forget that they have to do as part of the journey? They have to actually take action on it before they tell everybody about it?
Um, uh, I mean, action speaks louder than words, and certainly, if you respect your consumers, you need to be acting before you're talking. I think in general, that doesn't mean you can't talk about what your intent is or what your aim is for the future, but taking steps is really what counts. And I think, again, who could have predicted we are where we are today? But there are also a lot of brands that have fallen by the wayside, and those are brands that haven't been able to see, the change coming and understand the context they're in, and reset, relook at their goals.
So somewhere out there listening is someone who's a founder of a company smaller than VW, and they're saying, "Wait a minute, Greg, how does this idea of pivoting my brand story and changing that story work in a smaller entity? How do I change that story in a way that can matter to my market in any way close to what that was?"
Yeah, I mean that's a tough one to answer, because it depends on the category, the context, the audience, what it is. It's different for every brand. But I think that I think being connected to culture, I think is really important. I think having a point of view as a brand is important. And think having a story that is real and relevant and relatable to your audience is what you have to find.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people get stuck in that point just after that catalyzing moment, that something that happened that allows you to sort of understand, accept change. In that moment, people lose the step, because the way you started, I'm sure that the way you started getting out of that bed and the things that you thought you were going to do in your own journey weren't the way that things looked 6 months down the road or 9 months down the road or 12 months. Right? We're always adapting that, but it's the action that allows you to adapt. And it's the same thing in the VW story. I'm sure the first story wasn't the last story. You got better at telling the story by telling it, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think that's the lesson for small and medium-sized businesses, is that there's a reason you exist, and they're people that want your product, and there are more people you can convince to buy it. You need to understand them. You need to understand culturally where they're at. You need to understand the role your brand plays in their world and their life. And you need to tell your story honestly and openly. And that's always, the brands I've been lucky enough to work for, that's always been a big hallmark of their success. Is telling that story, but acting on the words.
And so practicing your story, perfecting your story, iterating your story. I think a lot of people struggle with doing that, especially in the social media empowered world, because everything looks so polished. I mean, people look at Mr. Beast's videos or other powerful YouTube marketer videos, and they say, I can't possibly compete with that. And so they don't even try. Isn't that true?
Yeah, no, I think that is true. But I'm sure Mr. Beast would tell you a story of a lot of struggle and and hardship and unpolished videos before he got to where he is now. And you can't just start there. You have to go there, and you have to set the path for that journey. And you can have that goal. You got to break it down into steps, and take it on.
Yeah, and Mr. Beast, Joe Rogan. There's a great video. I don't know if you've seen it, of Joe out there talking to. He's doing a stand-up routine in front of a few thousand people in Chicago, and this is 5 years into his podcast, that nobody said would work, right? Because it's 3 hours long, and it's just two people standing there, and no one's going to pay attention to this, no one's going to listen to this, and he's out there, and he's talking, and lo and behold, he goes, "Hey, does anybody listen to my podcast?" And the whole crowd goes nuts, right? It goes crazy, and he goes, "Oh, I guess people are listening." He had no idea. It's crazy, and of course he's got one of the top podcasts in the world. I think Spotify paid him $100 million recently to broadcast on his channel. So all of these people iterate their story in public, and isn't that sort of this idea of speed to iteration, speed to market, speed to creative? Isn't that sort of what became? It's interesting that change became the whole thing, and then you created a sort of a tool to help people change their story more quickly, isn't it?
You said that very nicely. We haven't communicated as well as you have here, so I might steal those words from you.
By all means, take them. They're yours. They're from your story.
I think that that the ad world, obviously, marketing has evolved tremendously over time, but the way ideas are generated and put out there hasn't changed for 76 years. So in the days before 1949, the way it used to work is a marketing guy for the brand would tell his account management guy this is what he wanted. A copywriter would then write a story or an ad, and then it would go to an art director in a different office who would put pictures to those words, and so it would go down this kind of production line of sorts. And so what Bill Bernbach did in 1949 when he founded DDB was he put the art director and copywriter together and formed a creative team. And what that did, and he made them equal partners. And what that did was it created there's a tension there that helps you get to better thinking. And in 10 years, that was picked up by most of the big agencies in America. And by 20 years later, it was the default model for the industry globally. And it still is today. And what's happened today, though, as a CMO, because I see it and feel it, is there are a lot of layers in between me and the guy who ultimately solves the problem, who's the executive creative director or the main creative guy who guides his teams. And especially having come from a startup world over the last 3 years, the thing is, anyone can act quickly. But you can do it and get it completely wrong. Or you can be slow and it's brilliant and it's too late and it doesn't matter. And so you've got to hit it. You've got to hit the nail on the head as culture. It moves in hours, and so I thought that what made a lot of sense to me, especially as all of these big holding companies were consolidating, and DDB in fact was being shut down. That name no longer exists as of this year. That it was time for a new model, and the idea of the model is to just cut everything out in between the chief marketing officer and the lead creative that is responsible for the business, and have those two be the team that that drives it. And so that's the idea. And so what it does is it brings marketing and strategy and creative all together in the room. And they're default examples of that. And I certainly can't compare myself to this example as an example. But Steve Jobs and Lee Clow from the agency were a wonderful team that produced some of the most iconic work that really positioned the Apple brand. That was a CEO and the main creative guy at an agency having a connection and a relationship and deciding on the future of the brand and how the brand needs to be positioned in the context of the world and culture and the audience they were going after. And so I think bringing those skill sets together has happened occasionally in the past, but not by design. And so that's the idea of Fixer, is to really bring that together, to short circuit all the layers and provide some clarity quickly.
I think it's profound. And I think that what's really interesting, you use a word that I think is really understood. I could probably say that better. But there's room for growth here around this idea that tension that brings things together, it brings better things together. You talked about that in terms of the creative team creating a tension that brought some benefit. There was clear tension. If you read the story of Jobs, in that marketing conversation, he disputed heavily on the basis of marketing what the purpose of marketing was. And there's this famous speech when they finally landed on it. Marketing is about values, and that's when they launched the first of those great and iconic ads about think differently. So I think it's so powerful that tension is something we avoid, and tension and change are almost always related, but there's a tension that's necessary. That's part of growth. There's a tension that's necessary that's part of change, and creating an environment where that tension can exist without the emotional flurry that can come along with that and the loss of identity is really powerful. And that's an opportunity for leaders, isn't it?
I think that's a great observation. Tension doesn't have to be negative. It can. If you look at tension in the context of being a team, not adversaries, it changes everything completely. And so in that sense, in the sense of an art director and copywriter coming together, they were equals and they were a team, and it was their job to crack the big idea together. The tension came in them being different people and having different points of views and beliefs, and being able to work through that and talk through that and get to a place where they land on something that makes sense to both of them, because then it's going to make sense to everyone. So it's really interesting. I think that as long as it comes from a good place, and I think that people have an equal say, and there's a feeling of being part of a team. Tension is very healthy.
Yeah, I love what you said about tension as part of a team, as opposed to tension being something that breaks apart a team. Greg, I have the feeling that we could go on for a long time, but I want to express great gratitude for the depth of our conversation. Thank you. And this is the time when we evoke a great paper napkin given to us about 11 years ago from a great friend of the show, John Rulin. He gave us a napkin that says, "What you appreciate appreciates." And what he meant was when you appreciate someone or something, it appreciates in value to you, but also to the world at large. It started a movement around gratitude. And what we're doing is paying forward that message, because he suddenly passed away about a year and a half ago, and we want that message to live on. So we ask all our guests to shout out someone or something at the end of the episode in our time together. Who would you like to shout out?
I would like to shout out to my wife, Rain, who's a superhero. Her mom passed away about 3 months ago, And, we were there when it happened. And, she's been this tower of strength. And, we have 2 young boys, relatively young, that, she has loved and held and supported. And, it takes a lot to sacrifice and put your own emotions aside to give to others after you've experienced something like that. So she's my superhero, and my shout out is to her.
I hope that she not only hears it but sees this, because the expression on your face was everything. Greg, thank you for joining me, and thank you for that shout out.
Awesome. Thank you, Gordon. Appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Greg, thank you. Thank you for the courage of your story. Thank you for the clarity of your thinking. And thank you for the simplicity of that napkin. One word, change. Yet inside that one word, we uncovered powerful truths. First, change begins with acceptance, not resignation, not surrender, acceptance. Because the moment you accept where you are is the moment you regain power over where you're going. Second, belief comes before evidence. You decided that you would play rugby again before the proof existed. And maybe someone listening right now needs to decide before the evidence shows up. Third, act before you announce. Volkswagen didn't just reposition messaging, they changed their behavior. And in leadership, action always speaks louder than positioning. Fourth, tension inside a team can be healthy. When it's rooted in sharp purpose, tension strengthens thinking, and it doesn't fracture identity, it actually sharpens it. Fifth, speed requires clarity. Fast without direction is chaos. Brilliant but late is irrelevant. Clarity is the multiplier, is the accelerator. So as we sit with those 5 ideas, we may begin to notice which one resonates most strongly. And it's interesting how the one that makes you slightly uncomfortable is often the one that holds the most growth. So here's your invitation. Take out a napkin, write one word. Not the word that you think sounds impressive, but the word that feels necessary. And as you write it, allow yourself to imagine who you become when you live it consistently. Because change doesn't happen all at once. It happens the moment you decide and then act. If this episode moved you to think about change or act on change, then subscribe, leave a review, and share it, most importantly, with someone who may be navigating some uncertainty. And when you write your word on the napkin, post it and tag it with #PaperNapkinWisdom. Small enough to fit on a napkin, big enough to change your life. Until next time, one napkin, one idea, and one shift. And sometimes, even one word is enough. Make it a great day.